Dear students of class 8, my topic today I like to discuss the new topic, that is fourth chapter, Tribals and the Vision of a Golden Age. Now, what do you understand by the tribal society or tribals? You know that they are aborigines and son of the soil, the Coalville, Munda, Khasi, Orao, etc. Those who lived in the different regions of India, and since ancient time they enjoyed freedom. What type of freedom? They could hunt animals, they could collect fruits and roots and vegetables and meat from the jungles, which were allowed to them up to 15th or 14th century. However, during gradually they lost their freedom during the Sultanate and Mughal period due to the urbanization, and forest was cleared and land was recovered. Urbanization began, migration of the people. Due to this actual situation, the tribals lost their the traditional living pattern. We know also the revenue settlements introduced by the British also hampered their life. It affected their lifestyle. We know that British introduced the permanent settlement, and I am telling about the British rule, what happened to them. British introduced the permanent settlement, Jamindar settlement in 1793. Lord Cornwallis did it, and as a result, Jamindar was created as a loyal class, a middleman who would look after the British rule or would be loyal to the British. And then naturally the huge number of forest areas where the tribals lived and the non-Adivasi peasants where the settled farmlands were placed under the rule of the Jamindars. The Jamindars actually exploited the tribals. Their sole interest, their purpose was the economic exploitation and the interest mainly. And actually the tribals were not allowed to carry on their early lifestyle and to collect the fruits or the fuel wood from the jungles. Jamindars also collected taxes from them, and it is in this way the Jamindars also exploited them in many different ways. The outsiders were allowed to settle in the forest areas. Outsiders meaning they are called dikus, like the moneylenders, businessmen, merchants, etc. And they began to exploit the innocent and simple tribals in different ways. However, we see that the traditional way of cultivation was generally the tribals preferred. They actually lived in the forest areas and they preferred the jhum cultivation, which was also known as shifting cultivation. And in this process, they were habituated with it, this system. They cleared the forest area. You know that the top of the trees were cleared, and so that the sunlight could come on the ground. And you see that around the vegetation, you see in and around the land, that is the vegetation was put into fire. It was cleared, and that in the ash, which was used as a potash for fertilizer, and thus this type they also scattered the seeds, and in this way sowed the seeds. In this way the jhum cultivation was practiced. It was a century-old custom. It was practiced in northeast and central India and northeastern region. However, this system actually we see that moreover the tribals' lifestyle was nomadic tribe. They were nomadic. They migrated from one place to another in search of food and animals, and that was the system. And however, this system, their lifestyle was affected due to the coming of the British and the different type of land settlements. Already I mentioned the name of Jamindari settlement. The many tribals of Kondavs, Odisha, and other, you see that the tribal people were affected by this, you see that the changes, so by this land settlement. Now, so the British, what they did, British, you see that when the British came, what was the effects of the British rule on the tribal people or lifestyle or people? First one, the commercialization of agriculture. Already I mentioned earlier that cash crops were introduced in India by the Britishers. That is called commercialization. There are new types of cash crops like jute, indigo, poppy seeds, you see that the opium and many others, you see that the tea and coffee were cultivated by them. And naturally, it affected the lifestyle of the tribals, and they acquired more and more land from the tribals. And tribals, many laws, forest laws were passed, prohibiting the tribals to enter into the forest. Like the forest regulation passed in 1865, Forest Act passed in 1878. It was that forest was declared as reserve forest, while the tribals were not allowed to enter into the forest. And they, generally tribal collected their for their livelihood. They collected the fuel fruits, roots, and also hunted animals. That was the traditional method, and they could just sustain the, you see that they carry on the living in this way. It was completely banned. Now the powers and functions of the tribal chiefs were changed. It was completely curtailed. They lost their administrative powers and authority, and they were unable to part from the traditional functions and was forced to follow the British laws. Meaning the traditional law, already I have mentioned, that is the traditional custom was to go into the forest, hunt the animals, collect the fruits, and that was their only way of living. And that was also they considered the forest as the very important part of the life. It was a source of their energy and also the culture. So it was the main basis of the tribal culture. However, it was completely stopped, and now we see that the British also, they also banned the jhum cultivation or shifting cultivation, and they preferred the tribals who practiced settled cultivation. The British liked those tribes who practiced settled cultivation. Why? Because the settled cultivation would give them a fixed amount of revenue, and whenever it is impossible to collect the revenue from the jhum cultivators, because they migrated, whenever they completed the jhum cultivation in one particular region, they migrated to other region, and they actually roamed in the different parts of the forest to carry on the jhum cultivation. It is very difficult for the British officials to collect the revenue from them. However, it was allowed in some restricted areas in northeast. Now, gradually we see that another important thing, already I mentioned that another important thing I should have mentioned earlier, that when the British, allowed the Jamindars also, that the collected revenue from the tribals, so that in the form of cash. And tribals were unable to pay the revenue in the form of cash. Naturally, they had to take borrow money from the moneylenders, either from the moneylenders or from Jamindars, which they actually could not pay in their lifetime. They are unable to pay the principal amount of the money, and also which actually had later fell trapped into the vicious cycle of the debt cycle, and naturally they were compelled to give labor, that is forced labor, that is called begari. And even generation after generation, they had to with construction of roads, construction of buildings, and the bridges, etc. And they had to work in the field, the paddy field, without they were not paid for this. And this is how they were. The system was known as begari system, and it was at that time very continued for a long time. It was in one type of operation which was carried out by the Jamindars for centuries. So we see that in this way, the commercialization of agriculture, the begari system, we see that also the different forest laws, also it deprived the Adivasis the traditional lifestyle, and they have completely, previously they could carry on their life you see that the living in their own way. It was completely shattered. Now, as a result of it, what happened? Adivasi and the freedom movement. See that as a result of it, the Adivasis from different regions revolted. It is, I can say that in 1772, the Paharia revolt, the Santal revolt of 1856, 55, 56, Kol revolt, the Koli revolt, you see that and the Munda revolt under Birsa Munda, and many other similar region. You see that the revolt organized. I am telling you an example of the Santal revolt. For example, Santal revolt occurred in the year 1855-56. It was organized under leadership of Sidhu and Kanu Murmu. We see that what happened to them. It is the same, the Dikus, that is the outsiders, moneylenders, businessmen, they went to the, you see that the Santal Parganas, that is in Chotnagpur region, they settled there, they began to exploit them, they exploit the innocent, simple tribals or Santals. Santals were, you see that, the tortured, exploited by the moneylenders, and gradually we see that ultimately it was gradually it became unbearable for them, and now they were the two tribal leaders, that is Sidhu and Kanu, they organized the Santals, 10,000 Santals, and they revolted against the British. However, the British realized that they are very skillful in archery with accurate aim. So the British took a plan or scheme. When they realized that they would not be able to fight with the British, with the Santals in the jungle areas, forest areas, so they wanted to bring them down under the foot of the hill. So they adopted a treachery, I should say, plan, and they fired the bullets without any, fired the guns without any bullets, etc., like that. And the Santals did not realize it. They actually came down, and whenever they came down under the British fired on them with real bullets. In this way, the thousands of Santals were killed. It is uneven, so that the battle was really not, so that the Santals with their bows and arrows could not fight with the guns. Naturally, in this way, the Santal revolt was suppressed. It was this is how we see the many other similar revolt was organized, the Munda revolt and the Birsa Munda, and we see Tana movement in 1920, it is under Tana Bhagat, and many other similar movement was the Khashi movement in we see that living in Assam, etc. And Andhra Pradesh, I can mention another movement which happened during the non-cooperation movement organized by Gandhiji, 1920-21. In the year 1922, that is, we see that in Andhra Pradesh, that is in the Guntur district, in the you see that the tribals of the Andhra region under the Alluri Sitaram Raju, they fought against the British, because ultimately we see that what happened there, the tribals also believed, Alluri Sitaram Raju, a leader of the tribal movement of Andhra Pradesh, he believed in the Gandhian doctrine of Ahimsa, but he believed that you see that the forces are necessary. He wanted to fight against the British forces, and he did, although he believed, he supported Gandhiji, but he adopted the violent means. And ultimately, the guerrilla warfare began, militant guerrilla warfare began. It is that ultimately you see that the Alluri Sitaram Raju was killed in an encounter with the British in the year 1924. This is how see that the many other similar tribal movement, tribal revolt or uprising occurred during the British rule, and all of them were suppressed by the British. However, what happened? We see that it actually prepared the ground for ultimately we see that the ultimate is in the year 1857, the Great Revolt of 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny occurred. And I am telling about these all revolts occurred before the mutiny. So all these revolts, the tribal revolts, prepared the ground for the Great Conflagration, Great Uprising of 1857. So these are, we see that this is in brief about the condition. How the tribal society was exploited, economically exploited, and brutally tortured by the British. as a result, and also this is how the tribal, this is how affected them and their lifestyle and their innocent tribal, the simple tribal, the people revolted against the British time and again in several years, several times. And this is how, in brief, I am telling, I discussed it. Thank you all.